Good morning, Scarlet Note, friends, family, those who are watching us via Facebook Live, YouTube, and or our website at scarletnote.org. This morning, I wanted to use this platform as a pastor to share my heart about the civil unrest of the protests that have turned unlawful at times and even violent post the brutal and the senseless killing of yet another black American in our country. In this case, that American, George Floyd. Whether or not the late Mr. Floyd was innocent or guilty, his life, like the life of all, is precious and indispensably invaluable. His life was taken from him in full view of many witnesses that were pleading for the preservation of his life to no avail. As a result of the crime that was committed against Mr. Floyd and the actions of the victimizers of this blatant crime, cities around our country, including our own, have taken to the streets in protests of their outrage and frustration. Not just because of the loss of George Floyd, but as a result of the compounding of lives lost leading to that of George Floyd. Many have used the moment to loot. Many have used this moment to riot and to commit crimes against others, businesses, law enforcement officials, and even innocent people. As tragic as the loss of life is, the very act of looting and the very act of rioting is reprehensible. It is inexcusable. Now, that being said, in the same way we all would have hoped that the coward who committed this heinous act would have paused and not reacted in haste towards Mr. Floyd, I want us as a people to consider the frustration of many black Americans who have seen the insurmountable carnage far too great to count committed by the very hands sworn to protect and serve. I'm in no way trying to justify looting or rioting, but what I am trying to do is what I hope you can try to do, and that is not run to conclusions or run into haste judgment and insensitivity of the circumstances only based on half-truths and false narratives. You see, I am the biological son of a black-skinned father who suffered his share of bigotry and hate in this country because of the color of his skin. My father was a gentle, kind soul who could hurt no one because he didn't have animus or hostility towards anyone. He loved people. In fact, my father was a pastor for 30 years. His love for people led him to bring homeless men and women to eat, bathe, and sleep in our family home. My brother Danny and I would often be asked to leave our bed so that people in need could occupy. He fed strays. He was a generous soul, but one day I saw a side of my father that I had never seen before. When I was dating my wife, Becky, now of 30 years, I was coming from work one evening and Becky and I worked together, and I was dropping her off at her house in Wilmington, and a neighborhood guy and his buddies of about 7 or 8 assaulted me. I was just turning 16 years old, and I was hit on the head, across the head with bottles. I was hit with bricks. I was kicked in the face repeatedly. I was kicked in the ribs over and over. in haste, I ran off. I left my car running, and I ran for my life until again I was cornered, and the beating continued until a brave Samaritan jumped in to save me. I had never been in any altercations before that or since, and I was relatively a good kid growing up. When I got home and my father saw what these kids had done to me, I saw a side of my father I had never seen before. The gentle man that I had grown up to see, that tender-hearted man, the pastor, Christian, religious man, a man of faith. My father armed himself with a machete in one hand. He went out to his shed and grabbed the blade of a power tool, and he wrapped it up in electrical cord, and he ran out in protest the injustice that had been committed against his son. He stood outside on a corner. He was yelling, and he was inciting the victimizers to come out and face him. I didn't mention that my dad was only 5 feet tall, weighed under 140 pounds. My point is that this side of Dad was the side I had never seen before and never saw again. Luckily for Dad and for those perpetrators, no one showed up and Dad's anger subsided. If you're not a parent, then you may not know what it feels like to have your children messed with. On the very day that Jesus dies on the cross, Scriptures tells us, the Bible tells us, that darkness overtook the city and that the earth trembled. There was an earthquake. That massive curtain in the temple was torn into two pieces, and that the graves gave up their dead, and that stones broke. Fear overtook the city. Why? There was a grievance that was committed against an innocent son. The word protest means, and I want to slow this down, but the word protest means a statement or an action expressing disapproval of or an objection to something. I'm going to say that one more time. Protests means a statement or an action expressing disapproval of or objection to something. As great as we'd like to think our country is, it is not without its flaws. Black Americans are and have been marginalized and treated unfairly socially, legally, economically, and in many more ways, listen, more than any other group of people in our country. The riots, the looting, and the wave of anger from many we've seen this past week is as a result of a protest. A protest. Protest against injustice. Protest against victimizers. Hurting a son, hurting a daughter. The thing about protests is that they can be silent and organized, or they can be violent or unhinged. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. The day after giving a speech, he was fighting and speaking against the unfair wages and treatment of sanitation workers and the loss of 2 Black American workers that died as a result. This is literally 4 years after the Civil Rights Act is signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson and leading peaceful protests all around our country. He's even being what history considers Dr. Martin Luther King to be the impetus of the civil rights movement. As a consequence, and most unfortunately, our country after his assassination would see the worst riots in our history as a country, lasting in some places over a year, including in our nearby city in Wilmington. These protests lasted over a year, and for over a year, we had military presence throughout the duration of that time. The size and kinds of protests decry the actions against a people. Now, my words to you who are watching, my words to you who are listening to me, the way to avoid protests is to live lives that avoid the need of protests in the first place. It begins by decrying negative and hurtful ideologies about people, about religions, and about sexual orientation. You want to stop looting? You want to stop rioting? Then you must stop the hurt at its inception. Stop unfair treatment when you see it. You have to stop unfair treatment when you hear it or when you feel it. Let's do our part to love as Jesus loved. Too often we are reactionary and not proactive. I'm a dad, and my children can tell you I never hurt a soul, but I cannot predict how rational I would be if one of my sons or daughter were hurt or their lives were heinously taken in the same way that George Floyd lost his life. Eric Garner in 2014 mustered the very same last words that George Floyd before his killing. I can't breathe. I can't breathe is the equivalent of I am drowning. It is the equivalent of I am hungry. I am cold. It is a plea of surrender and a cry for help. What makes us different from animals is the ability to answer the plea and help even if our lives depended on it. Since Eric Garner in 2014 uttered those words, I can't breathe, till George Floyd in 2020, too many Black Americans, innocent and unarmed men and women, have died at the hands of those who misplaced their authority. How can you help? What can we do? Well, it starts from within. Make a commitment to yourself, make a commitment to your family to change the vernacular in your home when speaking about people of any race. Open up your heart, open up your home and your generosity to people of other ethnicities and cultures. Don't try to explain away or be convinced about or defend your position during all of the riots and the protests. And open up your heart, your mind, your soul to the cry of a people crying out, I can't breathe. If, like me, you are in a position of influence because of a career, a business, or you've been elected by your peers to lead people and you are in a position of influence, use that influence to neutralize and bring equality and civility to those places. Lastly, to my fellow pastors and ministry colleagues, you know, when speaking about his church, Jesus said to Peter, feed my sheep. The sheep, the people, belong to God. We are to feed God's people. God's people, not our preference of a people. Pastors, look around at your staff. Look around at your board members, your eldership. Look around at your worship team, your Sunday school teachers, and start there. If the areas of influence within your church walls is one color, then you're probably part of the problem. Work intentionally to change and to eradicate injustice from its roots within the church walls. You know, the kingdom of heaven on earth that Jesus spoke about wasn't one of white people in one church on a Sunday and black people in another. The kingdom of heaven here on earth is an amalgamation of all people living out the truths of heaven here on earth for all people and towards all people. Commit yourself to reaching God's people and not your preference or only what you naturally attract. Get out of your comfort zone and feed Jesus' sheep. You know, it hurts me to say what I'm going to say next. But it wasn't the peaceful protest of Dr. Martin Luther King that solely and ultimately ended segregation and moved this country forward. But it was the outcry, the pangs of a nation that said enough is enough. Today, it seems that we as a nation are crying out the very same. Enough is enough. As a pastor, I don't need to be moved by social media or what's happening around me to pray for my community, to pray for my state, or to pray for my country. I do those things because it's part of my responsibility as a Christian to do. I'm committed as a pastor, I'm committed as a citizen, as a husband, I'm committed as a father to do my part to advocate against injustices that when I see them, when I hear them, when I feel them, I ask you to join me and you do the same. If you choose to remain silent in the presence of injustice, you're what's wrong.
Good morning, Scarlet Note. We are so glad that you joined us today. If this is your first time with us, we just want to say welcome. Please come back, and we are sending you a virtual hug. And if you're already a member of our family, we love you and we miss you. At Scarlet Note, we believe in the power of prayer, which is why we do prayer cards. Every Sunday, all of us fill out our prayer requests that we have for God and believe and know that He will answer. You can partake in this by going to scarletnote.org and fill out a prayer card online. And yes, our pastors will continually pray for them. Right now, we are going through some of the most difficult times, and all I can do in moments like this is pray. So I'm going to pray over the prayer cards, and I just ask that you join me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Thank you for bringing us all together to hear your word today. God, I just pray for this country. I pray for this world. I pray for peace and I pray for justice, God. I pray protection over communities that are struggling at the moment. I pray for those who are sick. I pray for those who are financially burdened. I just pray, God, that we just trust and believe that you have such a bigger plan than we can all imagine, God. Please help us love one another, help one another, and remember who you called us to be. To follow the life of Jesus, how he helped everyone, how he loved everyone, how he never judged anyone. So God, I pray for everyone who filled out a prayer card. I pray for blessings and blessings and blessings over their life, their children's life, and their children's life. Thank you for another day. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. In your name I pray, amen.
I am a Palestinian Christian, and I have lived all of my life in Bethlehem. Today, Bethlehem is a city that is completely surrounded by walls and fences. The wall just completely engulfs the city. Living in the wall is like living in a big prison, where you are deemed guilty. We grew up in a culture where we were called to hate Israelis for what they were doing to us. Every Israeli to me was a bad person who was occupying us, wanted to destroy us. And I learned that I can stand up for my rights and stand up for my dignity, and I can resist those who are occupying me, but doing it non-violently, without being violent to them. And I felt that this was the right thing to do. I would even say that this is what Jesus would be doing if he was in my place. Jesus would be standing with the victim against the victimizer, with the oppressed against the oppressor, with the occupied against the occupier. But part of my journey was to begin to really understand that my faith calls me to engage in much more. The time that Jesus lived in, he and his Jewish community were also living under a very suppressive occupation, the Roman occupation. And Jesus could have said anything to the Jewish community at that time. He could have said, we should make peace with our enemies. He could have said we should negotiate with our enemies. We should resolve our conflict with our enemies. He could have called his people to do that, and people would have been maybe very upset with him, and they would have maybe even labeled him as a traitor. Jesus went beyond all of this. He called us to love. What Jesus calls us to do is not just to make peace and then step away. He calls us into unity. He calls us into oneness. When you love somebody, when you love a member of your family, when you love your wife, your husband, you create a new oneness with them, a unity with them, where there is no other actually. The challenge to all of us is, how are we living this globally as well? And I believe that the teachings of Jesus to live them. We are not called to just make peace. We are called to create a beloved community of all the peoples of this land. And that, for me, is what loving the enemy is all about.
for our giving. At Scarlet Note, you can give in a few convenient ways. You can give online at scarletnote.org, or you can also text give. There will be a number on the screen and you just have to register one time and you'll be all set up. When we give, let's make sure we have a heart of a giver. That remember that when we give, God will always return 10 times more. And that remember that blessings aren't for us to keep, but for us to share. Let us pray. God, I thank you for everyone who's under the sound of my voice. I pray that everyone who gives today, that their seed will become a beautiful harvest, God. I pray for prosperity over everyone's life, financial restoration, family restoration, and just incredible blessings over everyone, God. I thank you for all that you have done in our lives and all that you're going to do. In your name I pray, amen.
Good morning, Scarlet Note fam. I wish we were all together because at this times like this, we need each other. Gives us a chance to, the motto of our church, we do life together, do better or worse. And this has definitely been one of those worst weeks. I don't know about you guys, but I'm struggling. And so one of the things that has helped, because this has been a very, very troubling time period, is, our motto that we put in, remember whose you are, so you know how to act where you are. So one of the things that's been helping me as well is the Psalms that I found. Psalm 16, 7 through 8. I will bless the Lord who counsels me, even at night when my thoughts trouble me. I always let the Lord guide me because he is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Because I've definitely been shaken these last days. I'm actually struggling to maintain a grip on my assignment. Not only this chat that we're going through today, because it's going to be different for me. I don't have any props. I don't have any graphs. Got a few scriptures that we're going to go through, and it's just basically me sharing my heart with my family. And I can't claim to be somebody that's in touch with their emotions a lot, guys. But this week, the events of these past days have, had my emotions swirling. I've been mad at times, I've been sad at times, I've been more than mad, I've just been confused, hurt. I can't say that I've honestly felt a lot like this in my life at all. The last time I can remember feeling this way was a couple of years ago when my mom passed. In the sense of I've lost something. And basically, what I've lost that I'm going to be struggling to maintain, and this is my first step in that, is my peace and my hope in mankind, basically. Because these issues have been going on a while. They're not new. The only thing that's new is they're now televised. So I had a conversation with my dad this week, and I was talking with him, and he was reminding me of a story that he used to tell me. He's a career Air Force officer. So when he was a lieutenant in the Air Force, when he would travel in the South back and forth between Texas and Georgia and Alabama, he would always wear his uniform. And I'm like, why did you always wear your uniform? And he told me, frankly, it was a matter of survival. In those days, you wanted somebody to know if you disappeared, if you went for gas and you didn't come back, that the government was going to come looking for you. The Air Force wanted to know why you didn't show up, and they were going to be asking questions. So the sad thing about that is, that was 1964. That was 55 years ago. So I'm not interested in trying to convince people, that my feelings are real, because the challenge that we have right now, every time my son goes out jogging at night, I have to fear whether or not he's going to come back safely. Every time I drive my car around, I have to worry about, am I going to get stopped again just because I drive a nice car? I don't understand. And sometimes I have to get on my knees and say, Lord, I don't understand where we are. I don't understand why in this reality world that we're living in, some people value a dog more than they value the life of black and brown people. If you think I'm kidding, go back. We live in Philadelphia. Go back and look and see what the sign said when Michael Vick played for the Eagles about how he should be shot and how he should be hung. So I'm going to stick to my notes a lot this time, because one of the things that was interesting when I was talking to the pastor, I said, okay, you sure you want me to do this week? He said, yeah, the only rule I have is don't cuss. So I'm going to stick to my notes to make sure that I do that. So I'm going to say I haven't lost all hope in mankind, but it's close. And the sad thing about it is it even extends to some people that call themselves Christians. I don't know why, when our principles should be based on love, we've lost that. And when I say we've lost that, we have to regain it. Sometimes you just feel like you're giving up, because I'm beyond tired with this battle. But men, this is Men's Month, and we know we don't always get to do what we want to do. We have wives and kids that are looking up to us for leadership and guidance, and we have to live up to that. There's a line in one of Dr. King's most famous speeches, his I Have a Dream speech, and it says, I have a dream that my 4 kids will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a beautiful 1-year-old granddaughter. I don't know if in her lifetime that dream's going to be a reality. My father dreamt for myself and my brother that we would experience it. I'm dreaming for my kids that they would experience it. Now I have a granddaughter, and we're still going through the same thing. But the good thing is I've got God. So when Pastor first told us, guess what, guys, your assignment is on David. I'm like, David. I wanted to be Joshua. You guys that know me, Joshua was my boy. I think David's kind of ratchet. Why is David ratchet? Because look at his life. Father didn't really love him. He had issues with his own kids. He had a son that was trying to kill him. His mentor was trying to kill him. He had a difficult life. So one of the things that as I looked into it, it's like, wow, why did he want to do David? Because, man, David's a lot like us. He lied, he cheated, he had issues. But one of the things that we have to go back to, he was called a man after God's own heart. He knew that a right relationship with God was the key to success in every area. No matter how much he screwed up and whatever he felt, it all came back to God. He repented and asked God for forgiveness. So I'm not saying that, what do I need forgiveness? I need forgiveness for where I feel because of the way I want to act. So I have to go back, what did we say before? Remember whose you are so you know how to act where you are, which is a big deal. When I was growing up, I had to act like I was the son of Colonel Clark because there were responsibilities that went with that. David taught his kids an important lesson. He taught them life lessons. He wasn't allowed to build the temple, but his son had to be prepared to build the temple, and he got everything together and showed him how to do that. The events of these past few days have made me think of some life lessons that were passed down to me from generation to generation, from my grandfather to my father, from my father to me, from me on to my son. It'd be nice if they had to stop, but this is where we are. We're in 2020, and we're still doing the same things. And so basically, what the lessons were, how to get home alive if you're stopped by the police. So hopefully they'll be able to put the bullets up on the screen. And basically, first, number one, keep both your hands on the wheel. Don't reach for your license. Don't reach for insurance. Don't reach for anything until you're given permission. Be respectful. Be polite at all times, even if you don't feel that way. Say yes, officer, no, officer. Do not admit to anything. Don't get mad at the ticket or being profiled or being called a boy or anything else that would normally get you upset. Above all, your goal is to get home safely and alive. No. Okay, you got it?
You said and alive.
Yep. So you guys may have just heard an alarm. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. So I may no longer have the same faith, but I do have faith in the Lord that He will help me to recover my strength. So what that alarm was, that was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Not a long time in chat that we've been speaking, but it's an eternity if somebody is kneeling on your neck and you can't breathe. So in order to get grounded, going back and looking at, I've got God. I've got to lean into that. So the thing that made me connect with David, and it is his darkest moments, he wrote the most powerful and beautiful Psalms. So for this message, I leaned into Psalm 31. So Psalm 31:9 says, "Be gracious to me, Lord, because I am in distress. My eyes are worn out from frustration. My whole being is well. Indeed, my life is consumed with grief and my years with groaning. My strength has failed because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away." Psalm 31:3-5. "For you are my rock and my fortress. You lead and guide me for your name's sake. You will free me from the net that is secretly set for me. For you are my refuge. Into your hand I trust my spirit. You have redeemed me, Lord God of truth." As we lean into him because he is our strength and our refuge. So one of the other verses that I have, "Be brave, be strong, don't give up, expect God to be here soon." And that verse is going to be on the screen. This concludes our chat. Not very long, but I wanted to share my heart with us. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And above all, give you peace. Amen.
I know your story. I've read it cover to cover. And I know the storms that will come. The waves will swell and the sky will darken. Though you'll fight against the current, you'll be swept away. You'll feel helpless and abandoned, and you'll wonder where I am in the midst of it all. I know this isn't the way you thought our relationship would work, but my plans are not for my comfort or yours. My purposes are always and only an expression of love. The scars in my hands are proof that love will sometimes lead you directly into the storm. Though you can't understand my plans, you can trust in one thing, that I am entirely good. You can't even imagine how good I am, and my plan for you is no different. When you shout asking where I am, know that I am right behind you, with my arms wrapped tightly around you, whispering, I will never let go. For you are the pinnacle of my creation and the center of my affection. There will come a day when I will quiet every storm and wipe away every tear. In that day, there will be no more pain or death. But until that day comes, I will be your anchor in this storm.